YouTube became overwhelmed with the content that is explaining and teaching the students grammar in many different languages. That's why I decided today to make this video and explain in this video how learning grammar is actually limited and how this wouldn't help you increase your fluency in a target language. Therefore, this video will be divided into parts, whereas in the first part of this video I will talk about learning grammar from my own perspective, and I will share my experience on learning grammar and how it actually affected my fluency or didn't affect it at all. And afterwards I will give you some scientific data about learning grammar and how learning grammar affects your proficiency in the target language and your ability to express yourself and to become fluent in the language. And I will give you as well some research that are published. So stay tuned until the end of this video and let's figure out how learning grammar could or cannot help you increase your proficiency in the target language. Let's go. Well, in the first part of this video I wanted to share my experience with English language, and I actually learned English language since I was a kid. I think I was 10 years old when I started learning English in my primary school, and all this process of learning, conscious learning English was based on grammar. So we have learned so many grammar rules, beginning with all these tenses that exist in English language, how to construct the sentences, where each word in the sentence should stay. And throughout all my educational system, from primary school through secondary school until the university, all lessons in English language were actually based on learning grammar rules and building skills, so to say. And this is mainly the concept of the schooling system that's based on skill building, and the idea that we build our skills throughout our language learning process, and then at one point we will start to speak the language, we'll be able to utter the sentences, we'll be able to understand the correspondent, and we'll be able to namely produce the language and become fluent one day. I figure out throughout my language learning process that at one point, even though I was a very good student, even though I always had the highest possible marks in English, and even though I was able to do all these tests in an excellent manner and get high scores, I haven't been able to speak and to produce the language even after all those years of conscious learning of the grammar rules, of the vocabulary, etc. So at one point, when I used to be at the university and when I really needed the proficiency in the English, I've wondered why such a thing occurred and how I'm not able to produce the language and to speak fluently English after all those years of studying this foreign language. What was wrong with me? And this is the moment of awakening for my language learning journey. This is the moment when I realized that maybe this concept of studying a foreign language is not the right way to do so. And I was trying to Google to search resources to find any possible author, any possible scientist that can explain this phenomena, to try to find whether there are similar cases where the people study one language for so long and they are not able to produce the language. So what I realize is that actually this is a very common thing throughout the world, that people study grammar and these rules and afterwards are not able to use the language in a proper manner. And I realized that there is one professor in the USA who is governing a totally different approach towards language learning, and his name is actually Stephen Krashen, and he's the one that conceptualized the theory of language acquisition that I found out almost more than 10 years ago, so somewhere around 2012. And this is something that opened my eyes and totally changed my perspective towards the language learning process. I actually stopped using this approach of learning grammar in my language process. So one of the key elements of this natural approach of learning foreign languages that Mr. Steven Krashen is advocating is that the learning of the grammar is actually very limited. It's limited because when you learn some grammar rules, you need to have a certain sort of situation in which you can use all these grammar rules that you have learned consciously. So this sort of situation is typical for testing. So you need to have a lot of time to think about the grammar rule and then to use it. So tests are typical situations in which we can use our conscious knowledge about the foreign language, namely the rules that we learn consciously. So fill in the blanks form, you have a blank spot in which you have to type a correct tense of a word that is in brackets, and then this is something that we don't have time to do when we are speaking to each other, when we're speaking with the correspondence. You usually don't have any time to think about whether you are going to use a simple present tense, present continuous tense, or a future tense. So this is not a natural situation in which you will be able to think about the rules that you consciously learn, but you have to do it within the process of language acquisition, so you have to do it a natural way. And the other thing that is a fact that we shouldn't focus on the grammar while learning a foreign languages, whether it's English, Spanish, or something else. There are a lot of grammar rules, and we cannot learn all these grammar rules. Even persons who are linguists, they don't know all grammar rules in a target language, and professors, they don't know all the rules. So it's pretty much impossible to know all the rules in any language, even in our native languages. And when you put aside that, we don't need to know any rules, because in this natural way of learning foreign languages, we just acquire them, and sometimes we know to apply the rule, but we don't know it consciously. So we use the rules, but we don't have conscious knowledge about rules. And this is why these two reasons are actually the main reasons why we shouldn't focus on grammar while learning a foreign language. But when you put aside that as well, we shouldn't focus on grammar rules as well, because learning grammar does not represent a sort of pleasure for anyone. So unless you're a linguist, unless you're a person who is supposed to be someone to immerse himself or herself in grammar, because this is his or her profession. But for the vast majority of language learners, language enthusiasts, learning grammar and rules, it's not fun, We shouldn't focus on this kind of content. And I will give you some more evidence and research. One of the research that has been done, and that Dr. Steven Krashen mentioned in one of his talks, is the research in which they examined two groups of students, in which one group of the students, they were learning a grammar of English language for one whole semester, and the other group of students didn't learn grammar in the same time frame, but the other group of students at the same time frame, they were only reading for the whole semester for like an hour per day. So they were allowed to do something that's called free voluntary reading. So they were choosing their own topic of interest and choosing the books that they are interested in, and they were reading for an hour per day. And what the research found out is that after 6 months, both of these groups were offered tests, grammar tests. And what's really amazing is that the group of students that were doing free voluntary reading had much better scores than those students that were doing only grammar in the same time frame and for the same amount of time. So this is one more evidence that we acquire a foreign language through reading and listening, not through conscious learning of the grammar rules. So what I would suggest, these are some of the conclusions of this video, is to focus much more within your language learning process on reading and listening the target language, and to put aside the conscious learning of grammar. I believe, and this is something that is scientifically proven, conscious learning of grammar won't improve your speaking skills, skills, your proficiency to express yourself in a target language. I pretty much think this is mostly waste of time. I don't say that one person should not learn grammar if he or she is interested to do so. It can be cool for someone, it can be fun, although this is a very limited number of persons. But I sincerely believe that learning grammar is very limited and should not be the focus of your language learning process. And that's why I said one of the conclusions is don't be focused on learning grammar throughout your language learning process. Focus much more on the comprehensive input, so listening and reading of the stuffs that you're interested in. And of course, you may use some grammar, you can take benefit of some grammar explanations at one point, but I recommend to search for grammar and grammar explanations only when you are somewhere at the advanced high intermediate level or advanced level. This is probably the best way when you can use grammar rules. And guys, thank you very much for watching this video, and if you liked it, please be so kind and consider subscribing to the channel and liking the video, because this helps this YouTube channel grow so much. And see you in some of the next videos. Bye!